In this episode of Motive Garage presented by Sparesbox, we're installing an oil air separator on our 22 Nissan Z Proto. Now, if you don't know how an oil catch can or an oil air separator work, or the difference between the two, we have a tech video on our channel that goes into huge detail about how they work and why every modified or performance car should have one. But the basic principle is this: engines breathe. During the combustion process, the air-fuel mixture, when it ignites and burns and has that explosion and pushes the piston down, some of that gas escapes around the piston ring and that air ends up inside the engine and it can build up pressure. It needs to be vented out somewhere, and usually it comes out of the cam covers and it actually goes back into the intake. Why? Well, the manufacturers, they can't let that oil and air mixture go out into the atmosphere due to emissions, so they plumb it back into the intake. Now, the problem with that is when that oil air vapor in your intake mixes with the petrol that you're trying to inject into the engine, it actually lowers the octane rating of the fuel. So you can't push the car as hard. Now, we're trying to modify these cars and push them harder, so we don't want that oil air vapor going back into the intake. So that's the first reason why we want an oil air separator for our Z. The other reason is, with this engine, we've actually been getting it a little bit smoky sometimes, usually after we've done some stuff with it and let it sit or driving normally. So potentially oil is building up in the inlet manifold, and then you turn the car off, it cools down, etc., and it pulls up, and then we start it, it gets a little bit smoky. When we're going hard and dyno tuning everything, it's fine. So we think that an oil air separator could help with that problem. So we reached out to the guys from Z1 Motorsport and we got their oil catch can kit for the new Nissan Z. Let's take a look. So this is the Z1 Motorsport's oil catch can kit, although I should call it Z1 Motorsport for our American viewers who are also watching this. Essentially, this is an oil air separator. The oil air mixture goes into one side, the mesh screen and the gauze and all of the metal inside tries to draw the oil out of that mixture, so the air that comes out of this and back into the intake doesn't have oil in it anymore. It should, in theory, slowly fill up with excess oil over time, and then you obviously undo it and you can drain it out. This kit comes with not just this oil air separator, the bracket to mount it comes with new silicone lines that replace the line that normally goes from the cam cover to the intake pipe. Obviously, one needs to go to the catch can and one on the way back. And it comes with some new clamps, some banjo fittings and everything you need to fit it. So relatively straightforward by the looks of it on the instructions. The only thing that makes it a little bit more, I guess, difficult is the fact that you need to remove one of the intercoolers out of the way to get to it. Once you do that, it looks pretty straightforward on their instructions, so let's go do it. So step one is we need to access the lines that go from the cam cover over to the intake, and that is all on the left-hand side. To do that, we're going to take the strap brace off, the engine cover off, and then move that intercooler out of the way. So let's go. So the actual fitting of the oil air separator itself isn't really that difficult. It's the bits around it that are fiddly. Obviously, modern engine bays are pretty busy. You've got to move the intercooler out of the way, strap brace off. You know, some of it's hard to get to. Some of it's very fiddly. I mean, if you've worked on cars a fair bit, you'll be okay. And it's one of those, like anything, right? Once you've done it once, it's actually pretty easy. Their silicone hoses fit really well. I used different hose clamps though, because they were very tight on the barbs and difficult. So I kind of did it slightly different with the hose clamps. But other than that, where their silicone lines go, all fit bang on exactly where they said they would. So they all fit under the intercooler where they're supposed to, down out of the way. It's all very neat and it's black, so you don't really notice it that much, which is good. But now it's basically time to put the intercooler back on, put it back together, and we're done. Well, there you have it. The Z1 Motorsports catch can kit is installed. It goes between the PCV valve and the inlet manifold. So what that means is when the car is driving under vacuum or cruising, which is most of your normal driving, that's when this thing will do its job. The PCV valve closes, obviously under boost, and then the breather on this side will then take over, which goes into the pre-turbo. So we may look at a solution to adding a catch can or oil air separator to this side of the engine as well. But stage one, that one's in, and we'll go see if it does its job.